Good evening, everybody. Good evening, friends. My name is Paul Sanders. I'm responsible for the Doriot Distinguished Speaker Series as a part of the UK Alumni Association. Welcome to this, the final Doriot Lecture of 2019. During this year, INSEAD has been celebrating 50 years since the first women graduated from the MBA. We've been doing our part here in the UK by showcasing just a few of the outstanding success stories. Jessica Yule, CFO of Royal Dutch Shell, spoke about making the right choices in the context of climate change. Anne Richards, then Chief Executive of M&G Investments and now Chief Executive of Fidelity International, spoke about managing business in uncertain times, which continues to be a relevant topic. Most recently, Karen Fawcett, former CEO of retail banking at Standard Chartered, spoke about achieving gender parity in our working lifetimes. Tonight, the series and our year culminates with Carolyn Fairbairn, Director General of the Confederation of British Industry. Many INSEAD alumni have found incredible success in one discipline or sector. A few can claim to have had such success in two. But not many can claim this success across multiple disciplines and sectors, both public and private, as Carolyn can. Carolyn began her career as an economist at the World Bank and later worked as a journalist for The Economist. She went to INSEAD and landed at McKinsey before catapulting into senior roles at the BBC. She returned to McKinsey as the head of the media practice before moving back into the media industry with ITV in the top strategy and group development role. Carolyn held influential roles from an early stage in her career. For example, she was part of the number 10 policy unit. From 2011 to 2015, Carolyn took on various prominent non-exec roles, including with the Financial Services Authority, with Capita, with the Competition and Markets Authority, and also with Lloyds Banking Group. She became a trustee of Marie Curie, UK, helping people and families to cope with terminal illness. In more recent times, of course, in her role as the Director General of the CBI, Carolyn has become the voice of UK business at one of the most important and tumultuous times in recent history. I cannot say that the very timely nature of Carolyn's address tonight was completely by accident. We did plan it to a certain extent. Perhaps we didn't know the extent to which the negotiations and debate would be at fever pitch. Carolyn, thank you for being here very much. The number of demands placed on your time at the moment we know must be immense, and we're looking forward to hearing your views on Britain beyond Brexit, including skills, immigration and innovation. Carolyn's presentation will be on the record, so feel free to tweet or share any thoughts on the usual channels. But to ensure that we have a very candid exchange during the Q&A session afterwards, please refrain from sharing anything from that segment of the discussion. Could all of you please welcome Carolyn to the stage?
Well, Paul, thank you very much, and it's absolutely great to be here. It's a real privilege to be here, and it was interesting as I sort of looked at my name up there and I saw 88J. I'm not even quite sure what the J stands for, but if you do the maths, you'll realise that I am 30 years a graduate of INSEAD, and what that meant is I had my 30-year reunion this year back in Fontainebleau. It is still a fantastic place, and we have to say we all went back and we thought none of us have changed a bit, just as indeed none of you have changed a bit since you were at INSEAD. But Fontainebleau still looked amazing. We had the canteen is still brilliant. There is still wine served with lunch. Many things don't change, but we did have, I have to say, some really fantastic words from the Dean about the role of business education and just this, I think, really profound need we have to rekindle the idea of business as being a force for good. and in a sense it's the defining issue of our age. I'm going to touch on it. I'm not going to start with it because what Paul suggested I talk about was Brexit and beyond, and I'm going to start with the Brexit bit, but I am going to try and get to beyond because we really do have to. And as Paul says, I will talk for about 10 or 12 minutes, but then what I would really welcome is a conversation because I think we're among friends, we're in this together, and I think we have some real challenges. So, but as Paul says, we are in this just extraordinary time, and if we had said, November the 21st for this a few months back when we fixed it, who knew we'd quite be here. So I'm actually going to start really in the moment, if I may, with the Brexit deal that is on the table. It's exactly a week since the Prime Minister, with a little bit of triumph, I think it's fair to say, unveiled her plan on the steps of Downing Street. And I think it has been a real week of real reflection about what we do about this deal. For those of you, I don't know if all of you know the CBI. I sometimes assume it, and I often don't actually. So I'm just going to say, a couple of words about who we are. So CBI, we speak for 190,000 businesses across the country. Some people think we're big business. We're not. We are all business. We speak for small companies, we speak for multinationals, we are in all regions and all sizes. And one of the things we do very much speak for international businesses, and it's a real pleasure to be welcomed here by Deutsche Bank because I think the contribution that our international businesses make to the UK is enormous. So we spent a week really talking to our members, and we've taken the decision about how we respond to this deal really seriously. In the same way that MPs, I think, probably have the biggest decision of their political careers to take. It looks like it's going to be on December the 10th or 11th, so that's in a heartbeat. I think it's a very important decision for business as well, because we know that the deal is not perfect. But the question is it something that we should move ahead with or not? Some of you may have seen we had our conference on Monday. We had nearly 2,000 people, 2,000 business leaders, politicians, media in Docklands. The Prime Minister came, she presented her deal, and it was interesting. You put that together with the consultation that we have had, and we are coming in support of the deal. And I just wanted to say a few words of why that is. And when we get on to questions, let's explore what your views are. So it's not perfect, it's a compromise, and it's a compromise for everyone, including us. But there are two, I think, really significant benefits, and they do sometimes get lost in the politics and the drama in Westminster. And that's one of the things we've been saying. This is actually about real lives in real communities across the country. But it does unlock a transition period, at least a 21-month transition period, and it avoids a no-deal outcome, potentially in perpetuity, actually, and that is worth a great deal. I'll say more in a moment. But the second thing is, it does open up a route to a long-term trade deal. There's an awful lot of time that's been spent talking about the backstop, and I can talk until I'm blue in the face on the backstop, so do ask me. But actually, that is not the core idea. The core idea is we now have a trade negotiation that will start in April of next year, and the Prime Minister has on the record that she is seeking frictionless trade. So that is an opportunity. Now, the importance of avoiding no deal, I'm often asked, and I'm not going to bore you again tonight with the arguments that the CBI have made about why no deal is so bad, but I'm going to bore you a tiny bit, because you keep on thinking that the case is made, and somebody will still come back and stand up and say it will all be fine. And can I just say something? It just will not be fine. We've talked to thousands of businesses across the country, and it won't be fine for three reasons, and it's about timeframes. So the first one is the timeframe we're in now, and this is about the preparations for no deal. And the number of businesses that we are talking to who have postponed investment or channeled investment into stockpiling or moved jobs offshore is now at 80%. It's at 80%. We survey, we ask all the time. We've got 80% of firms who've made a decision to move investment or change plans because of Brexit. That is real. It is now. And the trouble is that those stories are not on the front page of the FT. They happen behind closed doors. And as much as anything, they're about things that don't happen. I was with a Northeast transport firm the other day. £100 million investment in a manufacturing facility has now gone to Croatia. That is the kind of thing that's happening, and that's the time frame we're in now. There is then the actual effect of no deal, kind of when the storm comes in, if you like. And I think even Dominic Raab, erstwhile Brexit secretary, has realised that the artery that is Dover is actually a potential for an extraordinary logjam. And if we do have no deal, we will be in the position as a country of rationing goods coming into the country. So what will we do? I think we'll say medicines. I think we can all agree on that. But what then comes next? Is it fresh food? Is it supplies for our automotive industry? How on earth do we ration that? And what we know from the Port of Dover is a 2-minute delay will lead to traffic jams on our motorways. And you might say, well, we'll let everybody through. You know, we're not going to change the rules on our side. But are we really going to count on Calais not to? That is quite a game of chicken. So that is the storm blowing through. And then the third thing, of course, is what happens afterwards. What happens in a world where we are no longer an environment of frictionless trade. And I have that conversation quite a lot with our members. And many are clear with us that actually the advantages of the UK in terms of frictionless trade are why they're here. And if you talk to Japanese manufacturers who are here, and they employ 150,000 people in this country, they are here because of the window and the access to Europe. They are quite capable of just leaving and going somewhere else. Many of you here in the room, I think, are financial services firms. It's been quite interesting. We have not seen a mass exodus, but we have seen, I think, a slow change. And where will the city be in 5 to 10 years' time when the decisions about labour and capital are based on a very different equation? So, our conclusion is that no deal is intolerable. We're not the only people saying it. The NHS is saying it. Many in the government are saying it as well. So our conclusion is really this. The agreement isn't perfect, but now really is not a time to go backwards. I'm just going to touch on the second referendum because it is gathering pace, and we do have members who are arguing for it. They are in a small minority, but they argue persuasively, and I have to say I have a lot of sympathy for that argument because we do now know an awful lot more than we did 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and even 6 months ago about the hard choices involved in leaving the European Union. But I think that there are just hard, pragmatic, realistic choices to take here. And the road to a second referendum is murky, insecure, unclear, and could very easily tip us into no deal on the way, I'm afraid. And I do think as business, we're pragmatists, we're realists, and we play the cards in front of us. And our view is that this deal is the best way of bringing more certainty to our economy and moving on. And when we get to Q&A, I will debate that. Please do ask me questions, and I'd be very interested to know your views. But now I am going to actually say, we do need to move on, because one of the big things that we know is that there are many other challenges we should be talking about that have got nothing to do with the European Union. The robotics and AI revolution, the rise of China, climate change, growing inequality, global protectionism. These are really the forces that are going to be shaping our future. And some of them do lie at the root of why Brexit happened in the first place. And it's a story that I feel kind of began around about the time I was leaving INSEAD. So I don't know if you remember, that was the kind of time people were talking about, a book had just come out by Francis Fukuyama called The End of History. And it was about the idea that liberal democracy had kind of won. There'd be no more boom and bust. We'd all get better off. Liberal democracy had triumphed. And things didn't quite work out that way. So we had the biggest crash since the 1920s. We have had that sense of inequality just kind of rising. I think we felt it. It's regional. It's about gender. It's about class. And a feeling that the rewards of the market have been too concentrated towards the top. And then there's the whole issue of technology, that it's fueling unease. It holds great promise, but people do wonder what it will mean for their working lives. And so there's no question that we are in, I think, uncharted waters, and no one has the answers. They really don't. And the problem with that is that that's where ideology rushes in and fills the gap. And I feel that we have really seen it. It's not just in the Brexit debate. It's in all sorts of other areas as well. We've got radical ideas out there. And some of them are good, but some of them really risk harming the people who place their hope in them. And I think one of the things that I think we need to do as a business community is really make the case that decisions should be made with business and not to business. But we're going to have to make that case for why that is right. And I think that means we have to make some pretty big changes as well. We do need some humility in all of this. I think business does get things wrong. I mean, sometimes we get them badly wrong. I know that many of you will have watched with some horror the Carolyn case unfold. We've now had, people in Carlos Ghosn. We have all sorts of stories that unfold around us. And business does not have all the answers that we need. But I do think we need to go back to a real fundamental here, which is that business does have proven, powerful answers that are working all around us. I mean, in the UK, I think one of the things that is sometimes forgotten is that employment is at a record high. And there is still no better route out of poverty, no better route to a better life than a job. We have 27 million people employed by private companies in the UK, and that figure is rising. In terms of how we fund our public services, actually we quite often just talk about business tax in terms of how public services are funded. We don't talk about the employment that is created that helps to fund public services as well. If you do that calculation, 4/5 of our public services are in effect facilitated, made possible, tax revenues by private enterprise. And I would just point to the fact, and I think this is something I've said on a number of occasions, business has been extraordinarily resilient during this seismic uncertainty that we've seen. They've carried on investing, innovating, and protecting livelihoods across the country. And one of the things that I think we should have real confidence about is that business does remain the most extraordinary, powerful, proven force for good. And how we reinvent that and reassert that and reprove it, I think, is the challenge of our age. I think we've got a pretty clear idea of some of the things that need to happen. We hear it all the time from our younger members at the CBI. One of the things we did, actually Henrietta is in the audience, my deputy at the CBI, and she came up with the idea very early on that we needed to create a way at the CBI for younger leaders to have a voice. So early on we created an under 35 group. They've been enormously influential on us in terms of our views. And they have a very clear view of what business needs to be about. They talk about transparency, they talk about honesty, and they talk about purpose. And actually what I think that means is grounds for real optimism, because it means if you look at business and politics, if we look at the politicians who are really making the running in terms of where we should go, we have a lot of agreement. So the Conservatives call it a country that works for everyone. We remember that from Theresa May on the steps of Downing Street. Labour call it for the many, not for the few. And at the CBI, we are calling it prosperity shared, this idea of a truly shared prosperity. So that is a common goal, an economy of high productivity jobs across the country, built on science, innovation, rule of law, services, and dare I say it, predictability. I do think that we can get back to that, and we need to. We're known for it. We do need to renew our infrastructure. We do need to double our innovation spend. We crucially need to create opportunities for every young person. We need to have the skills and the opportunity for every young person. And that is something I think we can hold on to, an agreement between business and politics about the goals. What there's a lot less agreement on is the policy ideas to get there. And I am going to talk, I think, in a fairly pointed way now about some of the bad policies that are out there. We do need a better conversation. We know where not to look. We shouldn't be resurrecting old, failed ideologies from the past. We know that there is a case that is being made for renationalisation. And our message to those who convey that message, and we heard it on our platform on Monday from the Leader of the Opposition, is come and talk to business about how you fix the problem you want to fix. Everyone wants better public services. No one thinks it's right. I'm a rail commuter. I completely sign up to that. But let's talk about how we create a mixed economy that works, because neither business nor government can do it on their own. And we do need to remember that when nationalisation was last tried in the 1970s here in this country, it ushered in one of the darkest periods in our country's modern economic history, and we mustn't return there. I think we also know that extreme market ideology isn't right either. The idea that we become Singapore on Thames, the idea that we become this very low regulation cowboy nation is not what people want, and it's not, I talked to hundreds of businesses, it's not what business wants either. But there's one other answer that I have to say we think isn't good enough either, and that's the status quo. So it was Winston Churchill, almost exactly a century ago, who said that the maxim of the British people was business as usual. It might have been the right motto then, I think it was the right motto then. It's not the right one now. And I think if we were to choose one for our times, it might be something like disrupt or be disrupted. And if that's right, I think it applies hugely to business. Our members have been absolutely clear that we must change too, and I think that was the message from the conversations that I had in INSEAD with the Dean of INSEAD in October. Now more than ever, we do need to demonstrate that business is about so much more than just making money. Whether it's brewing or banking, we know this is to be true. It is about making a difference, creating jobs, services, products, ideas, opportunities. It's about a true purpose of business. And we must find a way, and I think that's the practical question we all face, about how we rekindle that sense of purpose, and not just in what our companies do, but in how business is perceived. So, getting practical. If that is right, and again, I welcome your views, what needs to happen next? So one of the things I think we know is that the greatest achievements in our society, if you look back over recent history, have come when business and government have worked together. So if you look at our privatised energy sector, working with government has cut emissions by almost 60% since 1990. If you go further back, Harold Macmillan's house building programme, we had a programme where we built 300,000 houses a year. Partnership between government and business. We can do it. And what these examples have in common is that it's when business and government together, often with others alongside, universities, unions, others in local government, we must get that spirit of collaboration back. Because too much of the government's, of the current approach in the UK today, and it's not just government, I think it's wider than that, is about enterprise and government acting apart. So what if instead we did decide to build something that was different? As business, we might call it a joint venture. Others are calling it a grand coalition. Choose your word, it doesn't matter. The name is far less important than what it could do. And if I can just give you one example, I think the one that matters to every business, and that is people. People, what can we do? Skills is just the common challenge of our time. We have a skills gap in this country that has been wide and it is widening, and we're about to embark on the technology revolution that will define our century. What if we built a joint venture on skills that created hard-edged commitments on both sides from government and business? Without getting too much into the weeds of current policy, take something like the apprenticeship levy. It's actually a very large sum, it's £3 billion. What if you use that really to transform the skills base of this country, and that we would respond in kind? So business currently spends £46 billion a year on skills. What if we undertook to spend that alongside the apprenticeship levy to really transform the digital skills base in this country? We could really make that work, but it would need to be a strategy, it would need to be a plan, and it would need to be a deal on both sides. Idea one. Idea two, and again very current, there's a major area of disagreement that we have with the government at the moment, and that's about immigration policy. So the government's plan at the moment is to pull the drawbridge up on what they call unskilled labour. Actually, it's anybody who's paid below £30,000. That includes technicians, that includes people who work in universities, that includes many medical staff. And our argument to government is that we could do so much better than that. It is a good idea to honour the democratic will that has been expressed about control, and I don't think we have any problem with that. But let's do it in a way that really recognises what we need as an economy to grow, and do it in partnership. So 2 ideas. I'm just going to finish now and just sum up with just this sort of simple thought. I think we do know that the turbulence of our times is an extraordinary challenge. And nothing I've talked about can be achieved without a good Brexit outcome. We have to get that right. But if we can secure it, And, you know, we can talk about the difficulties of getting this deal through Parliament in December, and I'm sure we will come to that. But if we can, then I think we have a real chance to turn challenge to opportunity. We can, I think, use this moment to look for new possibilities. It's a moment in a sense of crisis. I think there is that feeling of crisis, and we could use that to find new solutions to old problems. But it has to be about getting beyond the divisions, and it has to be about working together. Employer and employee, unions and investors, business and government. And that if we do that, we really can deliver prosperity that can be shared. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to take any questions that you have.